Hey, this is Simon Scriver.
And this is Nikki Bell.
We are running a virtual fundraising conference on November 19th. It's called Fundraising Everywhere, and you can find it at fundraisingeverywhere.com.
There's some amazing speakers that we've got lined up for you. We've got some names on there that you will be familiar with and some speakers that you may not have heard before, but all of them will be sharing amazing fundraising methods that are proven to work, and they will be teaching us how to do that in our own charities.
We've tried to make it really affordable for all organizations, but for small charities, it is completely free. So go look at it at fundraisingeverywhere.com, register now, join us. It will be accessible, it will be affordable, and it is amazing.
Yes.
You're listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast, talking all things fundraising, charities, nonprofits, and more. Here's your host, as always, Simon Scriver.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Just before I start, just to remind you, I have a free webinar coming up next week, or depending if you're listening to this, it might have already happened, and you can check it out. It's through Fundraising Everywhere. So if you look at the Fundraising Everywhere social media, or you look at my social media, you'll find it. And it's about bringing in new audiences, bringing in new subscribers and all of that. But let's get on with it, because I have a wonderful guest, and I don't want to take up too much of his busy time because he has a leak in his house. But my guest today, you probably know him because he's kind of made cameos on the podcast before, and he's obviously a big name in our sector. It's Mr. John Lepp. Hello, John.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yes. Hello. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. How's things? Any news?
I do have a low leak in my office in my home, and I won't bore the people with it, but yes, it's the bane of my existence at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to know more about that, they can listen to your dedicated podcast about leaks, and so go over and subscribe to that. Okay. So we've chatted on the podcast a little bit before, but you've never had an entire platform to yourself, I don't think. But particularly, I wanted to talk to you today because you've just put out this really great blog post. You often put out stuff about design because you are a designer, but you've just come out with this blog post, which is the top 10 list of design mistakes I see in direct response. And you've just kind of, this has gotten pretty popular because you've made it in a really nice, clear and concise manner for people to understand the mistakes that are happening out there. I think, first of all, I think some people are maybe not clear that you are a designer.
The work we do here at Agents of Good, Jen is trained as a writer. I'm trained also as a writer and a designer, and obviously we work strategically together on this art form of direct response. But my training is in design and writing, but I don't talk about design that much because it doesn't seem like people really it's not that they don't care, but I think in the context of direct response, it's not the most important thing to be worrying about in terms of creating a really good performing piece. We know classically in direct response, the most important thing is the list you have. So again, the context of where design sits in that list of what's most important, it's pretty much on the lowest part of the totem pole. So people don't really spend a lot of time talking about it, but it seems like people are more interested in talking about it now than they used to be, because I think it's a bit misunderstood. That's all.
Well, even you, I mean, I've seen you speak at events and webinars and stuff, and you're usually not talking about design. You're talking about the work that you guys have done. You're talking about direct mail. You're talking about things like that. But out of the public eye, you and I talk a lot about design because you have a lot of strong thoughts and views on beautiful design, on ugly design that's still good, and you seem to get a real kick out of this art form.
I always, try to remind people that, a lot of people, I'm generalizing, a lot of fundraisers, a lot of people think of design as the designer comes in and makes something look nice, to look pretty. Mm-hmm. And, I try to remind people, actually, the really best designers actually are in the pursuit of making sure that something works, trying to find a way to make something work, not necessarily look pretty. So, yeah, you and I talk about like ugly design, quote unquote, ugly design, or Jeff Brooks calls it corny design or whatever, because I know in certain scenarios as a designer that works. And I know what I need to do to make it work, and that makes it more effective. So a design, I remember talking to some design dicks years ago in Toronto who worked at agencies, like these big agencies you would think of and stuff like that, talking about the work that I do in direct mail, and they really look down their nose at me, like, you creating direct mail, God, like, what the fuck is that, sort of thing. And I was like, well, it's an art. I mean, it's an art form. I know as a designer that the more I remove myself out of the final solution, it tends to be more effective. It makes more money. But we live in a world that celebrates beauty. Let's be frank there. And that's frustrating, I think, for those of us who do work in the context of direct response. Our work will never win awards, even though it's far more effective than the most beautiful things out there. But that's okay. I'm not here to win awards. I'm here to get donors inspired to take some action to make the world a better place. That's my focus, not necessarily on creating something that's beautiful.
There's a weird gap there, isn't there? I mean, not just in our sector, but everywhere. And you see it online where people share examples of, like, this is really cool design, or this is a really clever ad or a clever concept. Without thinking about results, without thinking about if it actually works. And sometimes, it feels like we don't focus on what's important, what we're actually trying to get out of this communication. In nonprofit, we're trying to get people to take action, donate, do something differently. So does it matter if it looks good versus what the results actually are?
Well, I mean, how many people rage about this like awareness ads? You have organizations who will pony up some cash, or worse yet, approach this big name advertising agency to do this pro bono awareness campaign. The commercial agencies, is all fired up because they get to, like, do something completely creative and amazing that they want to make sure it gets into the awards, the awards circuit and stuff, and they can win awards for. And you see the most shitty, like, overly conceptual bullshit that you can possibly come up with. And yeah, it looks amazing, having an image of 10,000 planes flying all towards World Trade Center for, what was that, WWF?
Yeah,
it was a very striking visual, but how the fuck did that move anything forward? And that stuff just drives me crazy, because awareness campaigns are completely useless. When organizations say, let's do an awareness campaign, like, why do we need to do an awareness campaign? So even if you get me aware, which you're not going to, or maybe you will, but you leave me there, you leave me aware. You're not leaving me with, what can I actually do to solve this problem? And that's where fundraising and really good direct response steps in, which is, I'm talking to you, and this is what I need you to do, and why I need you to do it, and why I need you to do it right now, and I'm going to make it really easy for you to do it.
That WWF one is a really good example, and I think there's others like that, where if you sit as a non-profit person at your computer and spend time looking at it, or if you're a marketing person and you start to think about it, you think, yeah, that's really clever and I love that and that should win an award. But that's not what your audience is doing. Your audience is flicking between pages, they're flicking between channels, they only have a couple of seconds to take this in. And almost if it's too clever, the point gets missed. I'm not saying they don't understand it, but it just doesn't have the same impact that a really straightforward, well-designed piece could have.
And that's certainly, that's something I learned a long time ago. Like, my old boss, Steve Thomas in Canada, and even Jeff Brooks talks about, there's no room for being clever in direct response in your fundraising. It's just the moment someone needs to, like, think about it to get your concept, your idea, people are not going to spend the time. This is not the time or place for that kind of idea and stuff. And that's certainly, like, it's something I do see, as one of these things that I see over and over again, are people or designers trying to be too clever or trying to be too designy. And I know why. I mean, as a freelance, I remember the days of being a freelance designer and, providing solutions to clients or to my account people when I was working at the agency in Toronto. And people were like, this is too boring. Like, it's too simplistic. Your solution is, like, it's not interesting to look at. And trying to fight against that, and again, talking to freelance designers, or work with lots of freelance designers, and try to remind them that we need to sort of remove those kinds of conversations from the big conversation, which is, what's the objective here? What are we trying to get another human to do? What sort of action do we want them to take? And there's no room for subjectivity in that. You need to be basing your decisions. Every design decision I make is based on testing and knowledge, over 20 years of testing and knowledge. I'm not just randomly. I've had clients say, "Did you think about what font you used here?" And I'm like, "You better fucking believe I thought about what font I used here. And I've been thinking about this font for 20 years. How long have you been thinking about it for?" So
I have to say, like, share the story. Obviously, you know this, but for people who are listening, John designed my business cards. You designed my business cards, and and I love them, and everyone who sees them loves them. But the amount of thought and care that went into them was amazing. And you ended up tracking down this rare font that was from the west of Ireland, and there was like a whole story and a whole history with it. And I was just there, like, well, what about Arial or Comic Sans or whatever? And but the thought that went into actually making this really just the right piece, it was quite a beautiful thing. Like, you've really changed my view on design sometimes. So with your permission, I want to go through a bit of this blog post, and people can find it at agentsofgood.org. You guys have a good blog there, but I'm going to go through because you've done 10 tips, 10 of things that and I'm sure if you had more space and more time, you could have come up with a few more. But there's some really cool stuff in here. So I'm going to go through it and just kind of bounce it off you. The first one you said is that one of the main mistakes you see, the top 10 mistakes you see, is too much clutter in pursuit of interesting design. Clutter.
I mean, every clutter. I always remember, every time, every box, every line, every squiggle, every blob you're asking your designer to put on a page envelope or whatever, it is only detracting from what it is you're asking your donor to do. So less is more. I know that my job is to make sure something gets seen, is understood, and acted upon as quickly as possible. And of course, gets results. So I'm always like, does this element need to be here? No, it doesn't, because it's not it's not going to make me get more results by adding this line here. So it comes how it comes. So I'm always thinking about every design element. Is it going to increase my response rate, hopefully, or is it going to decrease my response rate?
Is it like a little fear thing that, we have the donor's attention because we're sending them something out, and it's like, let's cram as much in because we want them to know everything right here. Is it a little panic to get it all across, or why are people doing this?
I think from a design point of view, it's the fear of simplicity. I mean, we live in a world that the people who are able to simplify problems are not the ones who are celebrated. It's those who can complicate problems. I think, no, it's true. I mean, I don't know about you, but everyone, the people who have let me stop for a second before I say something I shouldn't say. I think the most important thing is we need to find ways to simplify problems so they're understood more quickly and can get acted upon quicker. And as a designer, I need to also think about that. This element, does it simplify the problem or make it more complicated? Or do I get in the way of the problem? Or am I getting the donor closer to the problem quicker? So again, everything I see is it's just like designers are just designing to make it look so nice. But it's just too much. You're getting away from what you want to say. And I think people are afraid of going, how can I just make sure that the picture looks nice and clear and the font is nice and big, and that's enough. I don't need to add anything. I don't need a starburst. I don't need a weird pattern in the background. I don't need this stuff. It does nothing for the message.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, a total lack of understanding of what makes an effective tagline or image on your outer envelope. This is a weird obsession of yours, is envelopes.
Oh, fuck. I literally lie awake at night thinking about outer envelopes, because I know my joke always is that even if I had a direct mail pack from like God himself, or probably better yet, Tom Ahern, if Tom had written the most beautiful letter, and I make a mess of the outer envelope, it's not going to matter what the letter says. It makes no difference. And when people send me stuff to critique, I'm always fascinated because all they ever send me is the letter. I'm like, what did the letter go in? That's what I want to see. And a lot of the direct response we see, again, is overly complicated. It looks like direct mail. It looks like solicitation. But I know that the best direct mail always is going to look, and I touch on that, of course, it looks like a personal piece of communication all the time. But people don't understand that tagline writing is an art form. I don't know why they don't understand it. I think there's research out there, there's information out there, but I know looking through my mother-in-law's stacks of mail, people they think I'm just going to say, Susie needs your help, read her story inside. And that's a good tagline. That is not a good or how to use what is a provocative image. In direct response, the best images you can use are always images with eye contact. And I don't care if it's a little girl, I don't care if it's a dog, I don't care if it's a jar with eyeballs on it. Eyeballs stop people in their tracks, and people don't seem to understand that. And I just don't know why. I mean, it's not like this is like, you don't need to study direct response or direct mail for 20 years to know that. That's common. Maybe you do. I don't know.
Well, you have to share the image of the big stack of envelopes that your mother-in-law or other people get in their post. And even if you only get 2 or 3 pieces in the mail, I mean, I personally, when I get my mail, you open it in order. You open it in order of what's exciting there, and you open the stuff which is just a plain white window envelope that looks like a bank statement. You open that last.
If at all.
If at all, yeah. So this is what we're trying to do, is that we're trying to intrigue people from that first point so that we catch their attention, we get them to open it quickly, we get that journey started before they even read the first word inside.
Yeah, and kind of moving in also into the next point about, so often organizations are using a sort of a standard, and here in the Canada and the US, we call them number 10 envelopes, but even in the UK or Australia, using I think it's DL envelopes. When you go through what most donors are getting, that's mostly what they're getting most of the time, and we need to move away from that. Through testing, I know that anything other than a standard envelope is better than a standard envelope, and plainer is better. Usually, in testing, just having your logo with a return address on the envelope is probably more powerful than any other thing you could think of. More often than not, unless you're a really amazing tagline writer or a really good designer. And
you're trying to make it look like one person writing to another. This is something you've said, that it's, I can't find the exact phrase, but you're talking about, if it was handwritten on the outside, if there's stamps on the outside as opposed to a business mark, it's things that makes it feel like one person has written to you.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly in the UK, I've been seeing it for a long time, and it certainly is more and more prevalent in the US and Canada, probably more Canada maybe than the US, is this sort of leaning towards this over professionalism in terms of our craft and our work. And especially working with our friends in the UK, everything I see, as what people are listening in the UK, you are in a world of shit. There's no doubt about it. You have been now for some time. But I'm always so fascinated by the fact that there doesn't seem to be helping themselves. They don't look like they're willing to do the work to come down to the level where they're back to understanding they're having personal conversations with other human beings. They're still putting up this very professional front with their glossy envelopes and beautiful photography and overly heavily branded stuff. That's not the stuff that donors are going to gravitate to when they walk out to their mailbox or go through their pile. Like you said, they're looking for the things where, oh, Simon sent me a postcard from such and such, or, well, this has some nice stamps on it, I'm not really sure, oh, it's from an organization I love, what is this today? We still put up all these barriers for people. It drives me crazy.
Which brings us to, your number 4. Number 3 you wrote was using a plain white envelope, a white number 10 envelope or DL envelope is a common mistake. But number 4 common mistake, you're saying direct response that looks too designy or computer manufactured. And I sometimes cite you as an example because you're the first person that I ever was aware of using coffee mug stains on correspondence to make it feel like someone had left their coffee mug on it and make it feel like there was someone on the other end actually writing this. You're a big believer in making mail look like someone actually touched it.
Yeah, I think it's those. I'm a big believer in leaving little visual clues that get a different part of people's brains engaged. I always talk about the idea of courier type, and again, I may get into that a little bit as well, but the idea of using courier, people, I would say courier, as a designer, courier is one of the most beautiful fonts in the world, because when I use courier in a direct response piece, there's something that happens. And what happens is that the donor looks upon this piece and there's a part of their brain that is engaged in a nostalgic kind of way. They're thinking of a different time that's relevant to them. And that's one thing. It's unlocking just a feeling for a different time. The other thing that's sort of happening at the same time is there, again, part of the brain is hearing a noise, which is that tick 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 ting, tick 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 ting, that sound of typewriters. Again, this is a very powerful, when we kind of unlock those kinds of like nostalgic kind of feelings, not totally like in your face, but in a very subtle kind of way. Coffee ring does the same thing. It does nothing, but actually does a whole lot. It does send a visual signal to someone, whether they're actually going, oh yes, I see this coffee ring. I wonder, someone must have looked at this and put their coffee mug down on it for a second. I don't think that's happening. I think they're thinking, this looks like something looked at and has sent along to me, which is just kind of interesting, you know? So I think that as a designer, I'm trying to always like, how can I don't need to someone consciously going, oh yes, I understand. I don't want them doing that, but I'm trying to find these different ways I can unlock something a bit deeper. Do you know what I mean? That I don't need them to process necessarily and stuff. So coffee ring does that. We always talk about these little touches, you know, these little tiny things. Computers don't put stamps on angles. Humans do, right? And I'm always trying to think, how can I put these little human touches into this pack? I always tell people, when I'm left-handed, when I write, I smear my ink all over the place. How can you add smeared ink to your pack? And you know, when you talk to people who are like, that doesn't suit our brand or whatever.
People will think we're unprofessional.
Yeah, it looks unprofessional. No, it looks human, is what it looks like. And I would say that, you know, we are in a sector of emotional storytelling, and we're asking people to provide funds to hopefully solve something, not buy a car, not do anything. If there's no room for us being human in appearing human, I don't know what this world seriously is coming to, honestly. Wow. And that's kind of how I feel sometimes. I'm like, I don't understand why people are so like, I know why it is. This is deviating a little bit, but I think that people are afraid of it coming across as human. When we're human, when I'm human to you, I'm now vulnerable. When I'm vulnerable to you, you can judge me, you can criticize me, you can take me right down. And I think organizationally, we're afraid of these things. We're afraid of being vulnerable. We're afraid of being human for the same reason, because we're judged.
Yeah.
This blows my mind. I mean, the best connections we have in life are situations where we're vulnerable and judged and open.
This there's like a tortured artist vibe coming off you now. Is, you know, like that? Vincent. This world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. The font stuff is really interesting, because again, you have a weird obsession with fonts. But Courier, 99% of people won't be able to picture Courier just by talking about it. Courier is the one that looks like a typewriter.
Yeah, it looks like a typewriter. And if you want to get extra nerdy, they used to also use a font called Prestige all the time for the same reason. It had that same kind of typewriter kind of look. These days, there are fonts called typewriter. You can download it, and it actually looks like proper typewriter font, which I've used as well in pieces for exactly the same reason, just to mix it up a little bit. But those sort of fonts, again, they're doing something other than just like they're readable, and the people's comprehension is very good with them, but it's doing something other than just being a nice type font or an ugly type font.
You talk about fonts in your point 5, and there's a few things here in terms of size and things like that. First of all, you talk about serif and sans serif, and I was maybe 30, 36 or 37 before I realized what that meant. It's basically that little line at the end of the lines on a font.
Little kick. A little bit of panache. I always tell this story,
little zing.
Little zing. When I was cutting my teeth in the advertising world, I had an old school English art director, and I remember Richard, because he like would smoke like a chimney in the studio, and he would always like get, you know, we had these things called loops, and the loops are these little like magnifying glass things that you'd hold up and you look at photographs like on a little contact sheet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? And also we take the ads, if I typeset an ad or something like that, and we send it off to typesetters for them to go through, but we would look at it with a loop and go through, and he's always like, get down and look at the typeface. And typefaces have so much character and expression, of which again send little signals to people. And I think you have to be slightly obsessive and nerdy about what is this face doing. And then I think there maybe is a certain level of creativeness there that maybe most generally people don't either care about or can't get behind, just don't get. But yes, Sans serif are the serif fonts always have little kicks, little bits of panache, little bits of like doohickeys, whatever you want to call them, on the edges of the characters, versus sans serif, which usually tend to be quite straight line. Now, the interesting a couple things. These days, contemporary type suggests that sans serif looks more contemporary. It looks more in the now. And so lots of organizations, I'm sure you're probably thinking about your direct mail letter right now. If you're going to think about it, you probably know you're using some sort of sans serif face in your letters. It's very common, more common than it used to be, because it adheres to your graphic standards, which are very contemporary and up to date, of course. The problem is usually in testing, and I'll unpack this a little bit. Usually in testing, you'll find that a serif font will perform better in your DM letter because it is still tends to be more readable in print format versus online, where we're used to everything being sans serif. But, and I'll add a but, this is why you test things. There's an organization in Canada called CNIB. You have one in the UK called RNIB. All the same thing, about an organization that helps the seeing impaired or blind or whatever that may be and stuff. And they'd done some testing years ago, and they did it with a design school here in Toronto, and they found that the best font for readability and comprehension was 16-point Verdana. And Verdana is a sans serif font. And so if you look at CNIB's stuff today, even, they are still using 16-point Verdana in everything. And so someone asked me about that on LinkedIn the other day about that. And I do recall that study. And that's why you test it. I don't do less than 14-point for anything anymore. And so again, I see organizations who are doing like 9-point sans serif, beautiful sans serif type in a direct response letter to donors, and your donor just can't read it. Like, everyone over the age of 40 has some sort of visual impairment. It's impossible to read.
Well, the size thing is really interesting because if you look at 14 point, if you're typing in Word and you set it to 14 and you print it out, it looks kind of ridiculously big. And you're talking about 16 there. It looks comical. And we have a tendency to make it smaller because we want to fit more on the page. But your point is that I've heard you make many, many times, is people, as they get older, like yourself, they become visually, we struggle to see these things. So we struggle to read it. We have to put in a little bit of effort, and therefore we lose interest quicker. So you're trying to take out all of the struggle to read by making that font really big.
You're sending a signal, right? I mean, you're sending a signal to your donor. If your donor opens up the pack and they see this big type that they can easily see, that's an empowering thing. I mean, and when I talk about donors, I'm always talking about people who are like 65 to 95. We don't, in this world, does not do a lot to empower those people anymore. It's all about reminding them how old they are every time they turn around. And so doing something like putting a bigger typeface, which they can look at and they can read without a lot of effort, that's a very empowering moment for them. I'm putting them in a position where already they're in a positive frame of mind to hopefully do what I need them to do. And too often designers and fundraisers are thinking about our needs or how that's comical to us. And it's like, or organizations who cram a letter on one page of the letter and leave the back blank and print it at 9-point type. Blow it up to fucking 18 point and fill both sides of the page. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why? Because for our generation, or people who are younger, we're like, no one's going to read a 2-page letter. No one's going to read an 8-page letter. They do. 4 pages is better than anything all the time. People will read really well-crafted copies, especially set at a large point size. But people are mystified by this. Like, you're kidding. I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. Fucking test it.
My son's school, they do most of their correspondence in Comic Sans. And I know, you and all designers have a thing against Comic Sans, but this is actually the font they choose as teachers of our youth.
Yes,
that's pretty scary. Number 6, you talked about reversed out type being one of your pet hates. And what you mean by that is you're talking about like white type on a black background, or a color, a light font on a dark background. Yeah, again, it looks cool.
It looks cool as hell. I mean, it comes back to the donors we're talking to, these people who are 65 to 95 years old, and may have some level of visual impairment. I know that 100% black type on 100% white background is going to have the maximum amount of readability for most people. There's nothing to do with me, nothing to do with what I like, nothing to do with what I think is cool as hell. That is the bottom line, and that's why everything I do has to be 100% black type. If you're going to do reverse type, and make sure it's really, really, really big. But again, it's a dangerous territory. People have like color impairment. They can't see certain colors, color blindness. And that's a whole area of like they just can't. It's visual confusion. They can't see it. So again, I know it looks really nice. I see these beautiful, 48-page annual reports produced by these big organizations. Just don't do it.
Yeah, nobody reads those anyway.
No.
Number 7, you talk about a total lack of understanding on how donors are reading your letter. And essentially what you're talking about here is we assume that donors read it the way we want them to read it, which is starting at the top and going word by word, line by line down to the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, there's research of this that I quoted a fellow named Siegfried Vogel, who did a book back quite some time ago in German. And Siegfried, Dr. Siegfried Vogel, had done a bunch of research on how people actually visually look at a letter. So you can read, this is research, this isn't just me blowing smoke. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
That people, generally speaking, they will look at their name and address at the top, and they'll read the PS. And those two things, they'll make a decision to give or not. And so organizationally, I'll look at things and I'm like, why is there not a PS on this? Or you have a PS and it's just talking about something totally random and different from everything else in the letter. The PS could be your only and one chance to actually state what your offer is. And I may make a decision to give based on that one sentence. It's because so important.
People start at the top and then very often they'll jump down to the bottom to see who it's from and who that PS is. Yeah. And then they'll come back up and they'll bounce around a bit, but they're not going to read every word. They skim.
Some donors just look at those two things and decide to give or not. Some will go back to the top and start to skim, looking for bolding and underlining and other emphasis. Again, I always make sure when I add bolding and underlining and emphasis, it is on the donor, not on me. What I'm asking them to do and who they are and why they're important to me. That's where all the emphasis goes. So I'm only looking at my name, me, what they want from me, what they want from me. PS, this is what they want from me. Again, that's all stuff I can make decisions on. It makes me feel good about myself. And most donors, that's what they do. That's all they read. Now, you can't just go, well, I'll just mail in the rest of the letter, because there are donors who do read the whole letter. You can't just not do nothing for the rest. But Jeff Brooks always talks about one of my favorite things is the loneliest paragraph in your direct response letter. Which most people have never heard of that as an idea, which tends to be at the top of page 2. And I always joke with people, you want to bury the boring shit your boss wants to put in a direct mail letter, put it at the very top of page 2, because most donors are not reading that paragraph. That's where I put all the stats, the point form, like nitty gritty stuff that doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter in the context of your case. But yeah, how donors read your letter, you need to understand that science.
Yeah.
To do your job.
Tom Ahern talks about it a lot in newsletters. He says if you only read the headlines, you should be able to get the idea of what the story is. And if you only read the captions of the photos, because people start at that top level, yes, some of them are going to go deeper and read the whole thing, and we have stuff there for them, and some go even deeper still. But you're trying to get that gist across for skimmers. Yeah. The world is made up of skimmers.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Number 9, you said a total lack of understanding on good typography principles and practices. What do you mean by that?
I think it's back to that kind of obsession over type and understanding what different type says or what different type does. And again, I share the story of this my old pained art director from England and stuff like that. I think you need to be obsessive about thinking about typography and what it says, what's doing, what are the characteristics of typeface. When I do like a logo, for example, I always start with the typeface first, and I'll go through hundreds of different typefaces and variations, because I wanted to sing just with type, without any kind of identifier, without anything else, because fonts have characteristics. They have, they can be angry, they can be funny, they can be sad, they can be female, they can be male, they can be something totally in between or outside of those things. And you have to kind of think about type. Good designers think about type that way. The best designers I know are obsessive over making sure that the way the Y sits next to the S, there's a harmony there. It's just a feeling of they belong together in that space. You know, I don't sit and obsess over every single letter combination and every one of letter we do.
Well, I think you do.
Good font might, but I pick up good fonts that I know have the ability to work well together. Like there are some people out there who actually craft like handwritten fonts. They take people's handwriting, and create fonts out of it and stuff like that. And again, the really good ones, the really good type designers like that, spend time analyzing those characteristics of our own, even our own handwriting. Does my S look nice next to that I? And they're thinking about when they design it to make sure there's a comprehension there. There's a moment of beauty and stuff. So I think you have to be a little obsessive. You can't just randomly throw it on Comic Sans and go, job done, I'm good to go here. You know, it's just not the, you gotta think, what signal does that send to people when you use that, you know?
Comic Sans is a funny one because it's never a default. So someone has actually chosen it.
Totally
gone down.
And like, what's the thinking there? Like, what's the, like, you know what this needs? Like that sign above the sink, like washing your fucking dishes after lunch. It needs Comic Sans to make sure not too scary.
The font, I would read an entire book about the font of kitchen signs.
Right?
Like, it's like, so what is the most angry, aggressive font I can pick here?
All caps impact is probably one of those. Like, you know, you're pissed. The person who's done that, they're so fired up and angry. So using all caps impact, you're dead shit. You're in dead trouble. Yeah?
Pull in a piece of clip art of someone with a big exclamation mark over their head. And
oh, that's amazing. I love it.
John, what's your favorite font right now?
Right now, aside from Courier?
Courier is your practical font, but what's your love?
I just don't have one.
You can't choose?
No, because it's like wardrobes. You need different wardrobes for different scenarios.
It's like children. You can't choose between your children. Although you have a favorite, don't you, of your two kids?
No, I don't. And if I did, it would be Evelyn.
Because she listens to the podcast.
If Evelyn's listening, Evelyn, that's my favorite. And sorry for all the swearing, Evelyn, through this whole piece. I should be checking my language on this. Sorry.
Your last point, number 10, one of the things, the pet peeves, the mistakes you see is random formatting, placement of design elements, boxes, circles, swooshes, blobs, just overcomplicating it with all these random things.
Yeah, I mean, shows to me a designer who's not very confident in their ability, usually, you know, and again, a lot of organizations, I understand we're all strapped for cash. And so sometimes organizations, we're either executing this in-house or we're hiring, you know, maybe a newer, younger designer who's still learning their craft a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I always, whenever I see newer designers work, there's a lack of sophistication, and that's not about everything being amazingly beautiful and pretty. It's just about there's a lack of confidence in the way elements are put down on a page, or they left and right justify everything because they see it looks sophisticated and amazing, but they actually don't know how to utilize it properly and stuff. And so for me, I can look at something very easily and determine probably the level of designer that's had their hands on it, because again, it's just a confidence thing. I think designers who don't have a lot of confidence, whether it's you and you're not a designer, or someone who is a younger designer, or designers who just never learned how to design properly, it's like they always think more is more, where I know less is more from a communication point of view. So there's usually just little things in there, but again, more is not more, less is more. The simpler you can make the design, the more likely someone's going to take the action we need them to take. And so we need to step back as designers and remove ourselves the most we possibly can and get out of the way of letting the donor to take the action we want. So
there's a weird thing in the value of design where you know, if you're charging people to design, or you're trying to show your worth in design, that you feel like maybe you have to put more into it, because it's like, if it's too simple, it looks like it should be cheaper. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I remember working in-house in a nonprofit, and we had no budget, and I did the newsletter, and I kept it real simple, and I knew like the stories would carry it, and there was nothing, you know, no bells and whistles in it. And in the end, you know, people in the organization said it wasn't pretty enough, and we had to bin all those, and ended up finding budget to hire a designer just to make it look clean and sharp. I'm not convinced it would bring in any more money because it looks a bit slicker designed, but people had confidence in spending that money to get more back in terms of design. It's a weird, you have a weird industry where it's hard to put value on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like solution for, I mean, the classic tale that we all understand is like having that plumber come in and look at the thing, pull a 5-cent piece of something out of their toolbox and fix it in 30 seconds and hand you a bill for like $5,000. And you're like, hold on a second. And, you know, their whole point is, well, I have enough knowledge and experience to do this solution this quickly. So we're a world that's driven by, like, if we spend a lot of time on something, therefore that has more value than someone who knows is quicker to get to a good result or a better result. And I think, you know, from a design point of view, I spent a lot of time trying to make sure I don't look like I was anywhere near a piece. The best stuff I've ever seen always is simplistic, looks handmade, looks like people hand curated it for donors. The best newsletters can be done in-house. Because even as a thoughtful fundraiser, you're not going to spend a lot of time going, I'm going to throw 1,000 fonts at this. Here's a good picture. Here's a good story. Here's a good headline. And here, dear donor, this is what I hope you can do today, you know. But it is easily mucked about with and stuff. I do actually, you know, ask people, do your homework. I mean, design is a small part of this craft of direct response, but it's still a really important part. And certainly, it's from an agency point of view, it's what makes us stand apart, I think, from a lot of our agency contemporaries, because we do spend a lot of time obsessing about the creative as much as we do thinking about the list and making sure that we've thought about the segmentation and thought about the offer. We think about all these things obsessively. And so that's why we spend a lot of time talking about these other things. But design is just as important. And I obsess over that as much as I do everything else.
And I think that comes through in your work. And I think that's why I love it. And people who deal with it love it. And good job. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
So, John, you have obviously a bunch of stuff coming up, but actually you're one of the speakers at Fundraising Everywhere,
yes.
The virtual conference I'm co-founder of. You're going to be talking more about design at that in November.
Yes, I am. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to talk about. And because there's two things I'm playing with as teasers. One is I'm going to either spend a couple minutes unpacking 3 ideas, the most important 3 ideas around design and direct response, or I'm going to set a timer and basically work my way through a kind of different top 10 list and basically cram in as much as I possibly can every minute. And when the timer goes, I have to move on to the next topic, wherever I'm at with the conversation, and almost rapid fire. So
intense.
It could be really intense and totally insane. Both will have value, I think. Which for sure. One might be a little more exciting than the other, but I'm also obsessive in terms of making full points where people can actually go, I get this, and can move on to the next thing. So we'll see. I'm still working on it.
Lovely. Well, yeah. I know it's good. I know it's going to be great. If people want to learn more about you, they can go to agentsofgood.org, where this blog post is. I'll put a link to it. You've got some other great stuff on there, including the Star Wars series, which I always refer to, which is like a great how to do newsletters and do mail and things like that in the theme of Star Wars. Where else can people find you? Where's the best social media for people to?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is usually the place to be, isn't it? I mean, I still actually use Twitter like they used to use in 2009. I still talk to people. So if you want to chat about design or ask questions, you can email me or certainly just send me a tweet and at John Lepp, of course. And I'm always happy to watch for that and respond or interact or talk about cooking or the weather or whatever suits you. I'm easy.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. I love it. Thank you very much for your time, John. This has been great. And fundraisingeverywhere.com, agentsofgood.org, and we'll talk to you again on the podcast soon, I hope.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to changefundraising.com to learn more or get in touch with Simon. Or don't. Whatever. You're big enough to make your own decisions.
Hey, this is Simon Scriver.
And this is Nikki Bell.
We are running a virtual fundraising conference on November 19th. It's called Fundraising Everywhere, and you can find it at fundraisingeverywhere.com.
There's some amazing speakers that we've got lined up for you. We've got some names on there that you will be familiar with and some speakers that you may not have heard before, but all of them will be sharing amazing fundraising methods that are proven to work, and they will be teaching us how to do that in our own charities.
We've tried to make it really affordable for all organizations, but for small charities, it is completely free. So go look at it at fundraisingeverywhere.com, register now, join us. It will be accessible, it will be affordable, and it is amazing.
Yes.